where American crocodiles were endangered as recently as 15 or 16 years ago in 2007. They are now, guys, in danger.
Until the last significant predator in Florida disappeared without a trace, no one was aware of what might be hiding in the deep seas. The monarchs of the marsh were being driven away for months. Scientists were astounded since, in their opinion, nothing can hunt a fully grown crocodile. Years later, they uncover a horrifying reality that compels Florida officials to think about designating their waters as designated man-eater zones. Nobody anticipated this invasion. You must first comprehend the Florida Everglades battlefield in order to comprehend why this discovery sent shivers down the spine of the biological community. The indigenous king's slow-moving water and grass abound in the Florida Everglades, also referred to as the River of Grass. Since, even if this location is stunning, there is always a struggle for survival because it is home to one of the most unusual animals on the planet. The laws on this enormous sawgrass river are straightforward. Only the strongest and most intelligent people are allowed to reign. This means that two fabled reptiles were at the top of this food chain for a very long time. The American alligator is one of the swamp's rulers and brutal enforcers. It is a strong, versatile, and all-around species that can flourish practically anywhere there is fresh water. The American crocodile is its more elusive cousin. They both have extremely different personalities, despite the fact that they may not appear to be all that different. The American crocodile is generally shy and very hard to see, whereas alligators are known to be in control and to demand respect in public. If you're fortunate enough to come across one in the wild, it may attempt to swim away from you out of instinct. Usually, these animals have no interest in interacting with humans. Actually, all you need to know about them is found in their safety record. Despite popular belief, no American crocodile has ever been known to kill a human in the wild. These two species were able to coexist harmoniously in the same area for many generations. The crocodiles remained in the salt water, while the alligators stayed in the freshwater. They shared the land without engaging in full-scale conflict and respected the boundaries. Nature spent millions of years establishing this balance. We were familiar with their temperaments and customs. Because each animal remained in its own lane, the system was successful. However, in 2009, the kings of the swamp started to glance over their shoulders after rangers noticed that the laws were being broken. The incidents that caused it, the initial indicators were simple to overlook. Experienced airboat captains who were familiar with every croc and gator in their area began to report oddities. They saw that the strongest American crocodiles, which had occupied the greatest breeding locations for 10 years, had vanished. The basking spots that these specific crocodiles resided in and battled over were now deserted, despite the fact that you would assume they would have moved or established new territories. These animals were leaving their territory due to something significant. What is the source of an apex predator's run? It wasn't until a horrifying finding in the marsh made biologists take notice. Unusual sightings were reported in canals, bogs, and other locations where they had no right to be. These were alligator and crocodile remains. And not just any kind. Remains of the Florida Everglades masters. It appeared as though harsh, needless violence was being used to evacuate the area. Another puzzle that no one could answer was how these swamp kings were able to disappear without a fight. The swamp's stillness, which unmistakably demonstrated that the breeding grounds had turned into a hunting field, was the most unsettling alteration. The American crocodile has been a protected species for some time. These species have successfully reproduced after years of conservation efforts, bringing new generations to the isolated estuaries. Those nurseries were now deserted, due to the abrupt adoption of flight behavior by the natural rulers of the ecosystem. Areas that should have been swarming with year-old juveniles were empty, and a whole local food chain was disturbed. This typically occurs when an animal is atop the meal. Like the American crocodile, the chain chooses to flee, changing the natural order. When something like this happens, there's no mistake that the potential threat is absolutely undeniable. Increasingly hostile interactions with people added to the disorientation. The timid nature of the Native American crocodile has long been documented. However, fishermen reported that crocs were following tiny boats or abruptly snapping at them. Biologists realized a harmful outside force was at work since these reports and facts did not line up. The apex predators were being driven from their own home by something. The most well-known intruder in Florida was the subject of a local theory. However, their gaze was misdirected. Everyone suspected the Burmese python of being the cause of the growing number of missing and injured crocodile reports. Were alligator and crocodile remains, and not just any kind, remains of the Florida Everglades masters. It appeared as though harsh, needless violence was being used to evacuate the area. Another puzzle that no one could answer was how these swamp kings were able to disappear without a fight. The swamp's stillness, which unmistakably demonstrated that the breeding grounds had turned into a hunting field, was the most unsettling alteration. The American crocodile has been a protected species for some time. These species have successfully reproduced after years of conservation efforts, bringing new generations to the isolated estuaries. Those nurseries were now deserted. Due to the abrupt adoption of flight behavior by the natural rulers of the ecosystem, areas that should have been swarming with year-old juveniles were empty, and a whole local food chain was disturbed. This typically occurs when an animal is atop the meal. Like the American crocodile, the chain chooses to flee, changing the natural order. When something like this happens, there's no mistake that the potential threat is absolutely undeniable. Increasingly hostile interactions with people added to the disorientation. The timid nature of the Native American crocodile has long been documented. However, fishermen reported that crocs were following tiny boats or abruptly snapping at them. Biologists realized a harmful outside force was at work since these reports and facts did not line up. The apex predators were being driven from their own home by something. The most well-known intruder in Florida was the subject of a local theory. However, their gaze was misdirected. Everyone suspected the Burmese python of being the cause of the growing number of missing and injured crocodile reports. The Everglades were already unquestionably plagued by these enormous invading snakes. Naturally, pythons are notorious for decimating local mammal populations by consuming everything from deer to raccoons. Therefore, it made perfect sense to suppose that these enormous constrictors had now grown large and ambitious enough to begin attacking the crocodile population, particularly the swamp's monarchs. We are aware that pythons will pursue large wildlife, which reminds us of the 2005 incident in which a giant python attempted to devour a 6-foot alligator hole. The story made headlines when the snake physically burst open in an attempt to devour its rival. Most people thought this was just the next round of the turf conflict as the python population grew and moved more into the mangrove forests, which are also the American crocodile's own territory. At last, they believed the snakes had triumphed, but the forensic evidence declined to support this theory. After careful investigation, biologists soon concluded that what they had witnessed was not the product of a python. Pythons are typically cunning ambush predators that kill by choking their victim as they wrap around them, squeezing the life out of them. There were no indications that these lost crocodiles had been squashed. These reptiles' deaths were obviously caused by something else. The ambiguity was unsettling now that the first suspect had been eliminated, and it wasn't encouraging that this murderer could eliminate the Swamp Kings. This new menace demonstrated that it was an apex killer by leaving a trail in its wake. What was the cause of the Everglades' demise, if not the snakes? The solution appeared close to Miami, concealed in plain sight, while donning a disguise that nearly everyone was unaware of. The examination, the pivotal moment, arrived. When a baby crocodile, discovered close to a heavily populated urban area, miles away from any recognized American crocodile territory, was captured by the University of Florida's herpetology team. Just the location raised serious concerns. The team became concerned as soon as they had a clear view of the animal. This young animal's appearance was a prime illustration of the uncanny valley effect. There was something wrong with it, even though it appeared to be practically perfect. The snout was darker, seeming olive black rather than the common grayish-green of the native species, and it was abnormally strong and broader than usual. However, that wasn't all. Its personality was more worrisome. It exhibited a predatory aggressiveness never seen in fully grown local crocodiles and was extremely aggressive for such a young animal. The experts were perplexed and questioned whether they had encountered a hybrid crocodile that had crossed with an alligator or a mutant species. They had no definitive answers, and the only way to find out was to send tissue samples to a lab, where they would have to wait anxiously for months to receive DNA results. More stories of these unusual crocodiles surfaced during this stressful time. Researchers saw something horrifying about these species even before the DNA results were returned. Compared to local crocodiles of the same age, these mystery crocodiles were larger, more aggressive, and growing an estimated 28% faster. Whatever the species was, it was not only flourishing in Florida's environment, but also outperforming the local kings. When the eagerly anticipated results finally arrived, they discovered a significantly worse scenario than they had anticipated. The Native American crocodile's DNA did not match. It was neither an alligator hybrid nor mutant. Rather, Crocodilis niloticus was a wonderful fit. Without a doubt, the peculiar hostile crocodile they had discovered in a Miami canal was a Nile crocodile. They were surprised to learn that a monster from across the seas was taking the place of a sweet, reclusive reptile. Worst of all, the two species differed greatly from one another. The Nile crocodile is the complete opposite of the Native American crocodile, which has no known human fatalities in the U.S. The Nile croc is infamous for being an indiscriminate man-eater. It is thought to be the cause of between 50 and 200 human deaths annually throughout its native Africa. This predator's ferocity is renowned, and its biology focuses on huge mammals. These crocodiles may grow up to 18 feet long, weigh more than a ton, and have some of the strongest biting forces in the animal kingdom, which supports their terrible reputation. It was not a natural occurrence that was killing the Native American crocodiles. A cousin who was stronger, faster, and tenfold more aggressive was outcompeting them, displacing them, and possibly even preying on them. This 6,000-mile-away apex predator and infamous man-eater had abruptly established itself, hidden in plain sight, and was now assuming control of the Florida wetlands. The creature is real, and the identification has been verified. However, everyone is wondering how an African apex predator of this size could have sprung out of nowhere and started breeding in the center of the Florida Everglades. These crocodiles did not simply swim 6,000 miles across the Atlantic Ocean. That much is certain. Human activity is the only plausible answer, and in South Florida, that can only refer to the exotic pet trade. There is a sizable, frequently unregulated black market for exotic animals in Florida. Even though it is technically forbidden to own Nile crocodiles without specific high-security permits, careless collectors treat these lethal carnivores like pets. They just throw away their adorable little pet unsupervised when it grows into a massive, uncontrollable man-eater. The captive Nile crocodiles were discovered to be genetically identical following a battery of tests. This demonstrated that they weren't chosen at random. Actually, they all sprang from a tiny number of hatchlings that either escaped from a private facility with inadequate security or, more likely, were purposefully released by an owner who was unable to care for them. It is astounding how careless that one criminal conduct was. The greatest threat to the environment was caused by one person's negligence. These crocodiles were not new to the Everglades marsh because a single reptile that had been introduced years prior had successfully established a breeding colony. They had been hiding in the wetlands for a long time. Plain sight, effectively blending in with the Native American crocodiles because of their similar but somewhat different appearance. It wasn't that they appeared that was feared. It was the next place they could go. These crocodiles can easily withstand cold temperatures, and the Everglades provide all they need to proliferate. This indicates that the threat was increasing and heading north. The consequences: wildlife officials were immediately alarmed by this discovery, and the University of Florida and the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission set out to apprehend the invaders. Finding the invasion's original source before the breeding issue got out of control was a challenging assignment. They were successful in capturing 3 Nile crocodiles at the beginning of the mission. It was really worrisome to consider that there might be more of these species in the Everglades marsh. The ability to trap all of these invasive crocodiles was crucial to the ecosystem's future in Florida. Managing the situation might be disastrous even if there is just 1 Nile crocodile in these marshy waterways. The stakes were high, and the Nile crocodile's strength and rapid growth made it simple for them to outcompete the already endangered Native American crocodiles for food and habitat, ultimately contributing to their collapse. And so the Everglades are no longer just a fragile ecosystem fighting to survive climate change and human expansion. They have become a silent battleground, one where an unseen invader rewrote the rules of survival. What once ruled these waters for millions of years was pushed aside not by nature, but by human negligence. A single illegal decision may have unleashed a predator that never belonged here, one that hunts without fear and leaves no warnings behind. The Nile crocodile didn't arrive as a legend or a myth. It arrived quietly, blending in, growing stronger, and reshaping the balance of life in Florida's wetlands. And while officials race against time to contain the threat, one question still lingers. How many are still out there, watching from beneath the surface? The Everglades have always been dangerous, but now, something far more ruthless may be claiming them as its own. And if history has taught us anything, nature always collects its debt.